So today's materials are two articles exploring how real-time intelligence, AI, and continuous transaction controls are fundamentally redesigning the modern CFO's operating model. I can see what the author's going for here, and because the baseline material is incredibly strong and authoritative, our analysis is going to jump right in and focus strictly on advanced editorial alignment.
Yeah, I am really looking forward to diving into the mechanics of this.
Same here.
Because, the foundational premise here, moving from a periodic discovery of financial truth during a month-end close to, a continuous, unbroken signal of intelligence, it's just a fantastic anchor for the piece.
It really is. The material makes a strong case for this evolution, right? Highlighting the shift from the Enron and Sarbanes-Oxley era of compliance into the digital finance era and now into what the author calls the third transformation.
Right.
But as I understand it from the text, the core argument relies heavily on recent government mandates. Like, we see repeated mentions of real-time tax compliance rules.
Yeah, things like Saudi Arabia's Zaka or Italy's SDI.
Exactly. Or Poland's KSEF. And the author positions these specific regulatory hurdles as the primary driver forcing the CFO to abandon legacy systems. But I have to admit, reading through it, it feels a bit like saying the invention of the seatbelt was solely driven by the fear of getting a traffic ticket.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right? Rather than a broader, organic need for, well, driver safety and survival. So, if we lean so heavily on government mandates as the catalyst, does it limit the broader strategic appeal?
So the narrative heavily relies on real-time tax mandates as the primary catalyst for the CFO's evolution, which inadvertently narrows the broader scope of how AI and automation are reshaping the role.
I mean, I can see why the author did it, though. A government mandate with a hard deadline, it's a highly tangible anchor for the reader. It creates an immediate sense of urgency.
It absolutely creates urgency, and, from a structural standpoint, it's a great hook. But the weakness, however, is that by tying the concept of this third transformation almost exclusively to continuous transaction controls, or CTC, and e-invoicing compliance, the material risks reading like a niche regulatory white paper.
Yeah, which is definitely not the goal.
Right. And the author does a great job framing the individual invoice as a data event, which is a deeply powerful concept. But positioning tax compliance as the primary reason a CFO must fundamentally abandon the period close, it minimizes other massive, simultaneous pressures that are arguably more existential to the business.
Like what kind of pressures?
Well, think about dynamic market shifts, or instant capital allocation needs.
Oh, sure.
Or even massive supply chain volatility. Like, those commercial realities also demand real-time intelligence.
Right, because if I'm a CFO operating entirely in a region like North America, where we don't have these specific, sweeping, real-time national tax reporting laws on the horizon just yet, I might hit paragraph 3 and mentally check out.
Exactly. You might just assume this structural shift is just some European or Middle Eastern compliance issue.
Yeah, something I can just delegate to a regional tax director rather than a mandate for my entire global architecture.
And that is the exact risk. So, the suggestion here is to broaden the catalyst. We need to position these tax mandates as the most acute symptom of a much larger inevitable shift toward continuous transaction processing.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, because this will ensure the transition to an architect of financial intelligence feels universally applicable, regardless of the specific regulatory environment the reader operates in.
So we keep the tax mandates in the text because they are real and pressing, but we shift their weight in the overall narrative.
Right?
We treat them as the spark, but not the entire fire.
Exactly. Building on that, the text can pivot from regulatory survival to operational necessity.
Do you have a concrete example of how to actually do that in the draft?
Yeah, for concrete examples, you could add a sentence or two early on acknowledging that while government mandates force the issue structurally, it is actually real-time supply chain volatility and dynamic pricing pressures that aggressively mandate this architectural shift. You can frame the ZATCA, SDI, and KSEF mandates as the forcing function, like the immediate justification a CFO can use to get the initial architecture investment approved by the board.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Right? But the text must clarify that the ultimate strategic payoff extends far beyond just keeping tax authorities happy. If a CFO builds a system capable of clearing an XML invoice with a government portal in 1 second, well, they have also inadvertently built a system that gives them real-time visibility into their global cash position.
Yeah, that is the commercial payoff.
Exactly.
That framing makes so much sense. It elevates the conversation from regional compliance to global commercial strategy. It basically shows the CFO how to leverage a regulatory headache to fund a strategic overhaul.
Yes.
So if we accept that broader market volatility, not just tax law, is forcing this shift, the next logical hurdle is building the actual infrastructure to handle it. Let's look closely at the section discussing the architecture imperative.
Okay, let's do it.
So the text transitions into massive ERP overhauls like S/4HANA migrations, but the way it portrays the IT department's role in this build feels a bit concerning.
Yeah, the portrayal of the IT department implies a passive or adversarial relationship rather than the necessary strategic partnership required for this architectural shift.
I actually want to read a specific quote from the text to ground this.
Go for it.
The author warns that a CFO who, quote, delegates these decisions entirely to IT without a strategic view will find themselves operating on a foundation they do not understand and cannot interrogate, end quote.
Right.
It frames IT almost as a source of operational constraints, like a group that will build a fragmented patchwork if the CFO doesn't fiercely intervene.
Yeah, it's pretty aggressive.
Now, I understand the author is trying to empower the CFO to step up and take ownership of the data model. But doesn't the CFO have a valid historical reason to be paranoid? I mean, finance often hands a blank check to IT for a transformation project, only to get back a system that doesn't actually meet their reporting needs.
Well, the author's underlying premise that the CFO must own the financial data model is completely correct. The weakness, though, lies in the execution and the tone.
How so?
Framing IT as a group that needs to be tightly controlled subtly undermines the reality of what it actually takes to build enterprise-level centralized data orchestration. Like, building a single canonical data layer isn't just a matter of finance deciding what fields they want on a dashboard.
No, definitely not.
It requires deep symbiotic collaboration with the CIO or the CTO. A CFO cannot navigate millions of lines of legacy code, complex cloud server infrastructure, and enterprise security protocols alone.
Especially if you are doing a global migration. You are dealing with decades of technical debt.
Exactly. The text risks alienating technical readers, like CIOs or enterprise architects, who might be reviewing this piece alongside their finance counterparts.
Oh, that's a really good point. You don't want to insult half your audience.
Right. Furthermore, it risks making the CFO's mandate seem isolated from the rest of the C-suite. If the CFO walks into the boardroom with an adversarial mindset, treating IT like some unruly vendor they need to rein in, well, that implementation is going to stall.
Yeah, it's dead in the water.
The technical heavy lifting required to deliver real-time intelligence is immense, and it requires a unified front.
So the suggestion is to alter the phrasing to reflect a unified front, shifting the dynamic from avoiding IT delegation to actively partnering with them.
Yes, the suggestion is to reframe the dynamic to actively co-architecting with technology leadership. It is about shifting the CFO's stance from a defensive posture to a highly collaborative one.
What does that actually look like in the text, though? Because we still need to ensure the CFO doesn't just, hand over the keys and walk away.
Sure, so for concrete examples of how to implement this, instead of warning that delegating to IT leads to a foundation the CFO cannot interrogate, adjust the phrasing to emphasize co-authorship.
Okay.
For instance, the text could state that the modern CFO must translate financial intelligence requirements into IT mandates, or when discussing an S/4HANA migration specifically, frame it as a joint venture where finance sets the strategic destination and IT builds the engine.
Finance sets the destination, and IT builds the engine. I love that. That is a very clear visual way to describe the relationship.
Yeah, it really works.
It keeps the CFO in the driver's seat regarding the value of the data without pretending they are also a master mechanic who understands the underlying API integrations.
And it respects the deep technical expertise required from the IT department. The CFO defines what real-time risk looks like, and the CTO figures out how to securely pipe that data from a warehouse in Germany to headquarters in Chicago in under a second.
Okay, so logically, we have established the broad market catalyst for the change, and we have established the collaborative IT partnership needed to build the technological engine. Now we have to look at what happens when the finance team actually turns that engine on.
Right, the fun part.
So, a key theme running through this material seems to be the reliance on autonomous systems. The latter half of the text outlines how AI agents will handle exception handling, anomaly detection, and real-time reconciliation.
Yeah, the conceptual jump between gathering raw data events and generating strategic commercial intelligence lacks the crucial transitional step of how to build organizational trust in automated systems.
This jump really stood out to me. The text states the CFO will act as the governance authority over these autonomous systems. But earlier in the piece, the author themselves brought up the legacy of Enron and Sarbanes-Oxley.
Yes, they did.
Generations of CFOs and their teams have been trained that financial truth only comes from rigorous manual human validation. Like, they reconcile every single penny. The CFO signs off on the 10K under threat of personal legal liability.
It's a huge burden.
If a CFO's signature is on the line, telling them a black box AI verified the transactions isn't going to fly on day one.
No, it's not. The weakness is that the material confidently asserts AI governance for financial processes and real-time risk management as end states, but it glosses over the immense cultural and operational friction of getting there.
Yeah, the human element.
Exactly. You are talking about moving finance teams professionals literally trained to find truth through manual reconciliation to blindly trusting AI agents acting in milliseconds. You cannot simply flip a switch and expect an entire accounting department to let go of their spreadsheets without severe organizational anxiety.
No kidding.
The text currently assumes that once the technology is built, the trust automatically follows.
I get the concept of building trust and why it is a barrier. But if I am the author of a high-level strategic piece about the future of the CFO, I don't want to derail my paper with a 10-page detour into HR change management and corporate psychology.
Right, absolutely.
So how do they bridge this gap concisely while staying focused on the architecture?
That is a great point. You definitely want to avoid getting bogged down in change management theory. So the suggestion here is to introduce a brief, highly operational bridge within the existing for capability section.
Operational bridge. Okay.
Yeah. This bridge needs to address trust building through a purely mechanical lens. We need to show the reader the how of the transition using concepts they already understand, rather than, soft skills.
Okay, so operationalizing trust. What are some concrete examples of how to write that into the AI governance section?
Well, you could expand the AI governance paragraph to focus heavily on explainable AI.
Okay, explainable AI.
Yeah, for example, write a scenario where if the AI rejects an invoice or flags a transaction, the system is required to show the human auditor exactly which parameters triggered the decision.
Right, so it's not a black box.
Exactly. Furthermore, suggest that the CFO's first governance task isn't turning the AI loose, but rather designing a rigorous phase of parallel testing.
Oh, parallel testing makes perfect sense. It transforms an abstract, futuristic AI concept into a standard, rigorous finance control that any auditor already understands.
Exactly. You illustrate a period where the AI system runs silently in the background, executing the month-end close simultaneously alongside the human reconcilers.
Like a shadow run.
Yes, exactly. And at the end of the month, the CFO reviews the variance between the machine's work and the human's work. This effectively shows the reader how to shift their team's mindset from data assembler to intelligence architect without risking the balance sheet.
Yeah, they see the machine working side by side with them.
Right. Proven its mathematical worth and accuracy over several quarters before they ever hand over the actual reins.
It proves the physics of the safety net before you ask the acrobat to jump. It honors the reality of the CFO's ultimate burden, which is acting as the guardian of the organization's financial integrity. Acknowledging that trusting a new system to uphold that integrity is a monumental, step-by-step shift. It just makes the author's argument much more grounded and credible.
Yeah, by tightening the completeness of the catalyst, refining the tone of the IT partnership, and bridging that structural jump regarding AI trust, the baseline material transforms from a visionary concept into an indispensable operational roadmap for any finance leader.
Absolutely. So, to synthesize what we have covered today,
We reviewed an incredibly strong submission that accurately identifies the seismic technological shifts happening in the CFO's operating model. To push this material even further, we explored 3 actionable areas. First, expanding the catalyst for change. By framing tax compliance mandates as an immediate forcing function rather than the sole driver, the text can capture the broader market pressures, like supply chain volatility, that universally demand real-time intelligence.
Right.
Second, reframing the relationship with IT. Shifting the narrative from a defensive posture against IT into a collaborative co-architectural partnership respects the deep technical reality of building enterprise data layers.
Yeah.
And finally, addressing the psychological transition of the finance team. By introducing mechanical trust-building concepts like parallel testing and explainable AI, we provide a crucial operational bridge that helps professionals transition to governing autonomous systems.
Spot on.
So, to the listener who submitted this work, please implement these actionable suggestions, iterate on your drafts, and submit your revised material back in for another round of feedback and a future critique. The core ideas here are powerful, and refining these edges will drastically increase their impact. Keep pushing your work forward.